You're watching Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events.
Great. Well, we have been talking about the need to talk to people, that we find ourselves at a point in time where I think we're in agreement that there are great pressures in the system that are working to the advantage of early care and education. Okay? But I think that because lots of folks haven't been a part of this conversation, we need to understand that that interface between the political community, when we talk about political will and the things that need to get done, and the investment community and the economists and et cetera, okay? We're not done with the conversation. So let me try and put that again in some context. So I think we find ourselves significantly improving Wisconsin's ability to compete for the workers and we need to secure the future we want, requires making wise, sustainable, strategic investments in a variety of areas, right? I'm assuming nobody disagrees with that statement, okay? Second statement, the target audiences that you need advocating for early care and education may not be as well informed as many elected officials and community leaders are about the challenges and opportunities affecting them and the communities in which they live. And here's the heart of it. If target audience awareness and understanding of the issues and of the need for investments required is insufficient, the gap between what needs to be done and what we can do widens. It does not narrow. So we need to figure out how to do this correctly. The bottom line is there will be questions, okay? This is a great session. There's a love fest here. I mean, you spent time understanding this. Those of us who don't do what you do have come and listened to the voices and listened to the stories and say, wow, how can we not be doing this? Okay? And that's a great start and it's a great place, but we need to understand that there are already opinions and attitudes that intrude on that conversation. We can't afford that. There's no way we should do that without more requirements. Why aren't you getting a job to do that? You've heard these voices. The challenge is we need to inform the public so that they can evaluate the advocacy so their lack of perspective or understanding does not intrude on the capacity of the political community to do what is wise and advisable. Okay? That's the simplest way I know to put the equation. Right? Meaningful public engagement with strategic public policy decision making is impossible without a robust effort to enhance public awareness of and access to accurate, relevant, timely information. If we talk about a 3-year to 5-year plan or a 5 to 10-year plan and it does not have communications in it, you have just wasted your entire time. Okay? It's that simple. So lessons learned, and I'm going to, what I would say to you is, we're not going to teach you how to do these things today. We're going to flag things for you, okay? And then suggest that as you move forward, you need to spend some time on it. Let me touch quickly on 4 things. The first is that public engagement is not a spectator sport, okay? It is, people they lead busy lives, all right? They have already decided how they want to spend their leisure time, what little they may or not have of it. They want to play with their kids, they want to watch television, they want to whatever it's going to be. Entertainment is a big category. We don't qualify, okay? So if you just look at things as it is, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to get their engagement? You have to be concerned about that vague general public that's out there. Now you can target it, okay, and you should target that population, but even once you've targeted it, you have to say, why do they care and how do I talk to them about that particular issue? The second thing is that you understand people tend to rate the credibility of information they receive on the basis of the source of the information being provided. The single most credible thing they believe in is their own personal experience. Okay? And part of the challenge is you never have any idea what their personal experience regarding your situation or your issue is, okay? But you got to start there. The second thing they find most credible are family members and close friends, okay? The third thing that they find most credible are people who agree with them, okay? And the fourth thing they find most credible is news sources and other information sources that tend to confirm what they already believe, all right? In a nutshell, without doing the vagaries of it, what that suggests is you really do need to be talking to people at their personal level of existence. And so the nurse who's busted his or her buns at Gunderson over the last year to deal with this terrible situation, that's a target audience. That's an interesting audience. They have been through stress. They understand these bits and pieces. So you want to think through like that. Third, making the merits need argument and winning support for the solution you are advocating are not the same thing. Okay? The challenge is this. So you come here, persuade me, okay, now you're an advocate with an opinion. All right? That's how far we got. The solution piece, you've identified it, but we don't have a plan for getting there. And so now, how do I engage with that particular piece? What is it I leave the room to do? And the answer is, God, those are wonderful people. Man, they are right. We got to do this. What was it they wanted you to do? Okay? Have to think about how those pieces play out. And the fourth thing I would tell you in messaging is when money is involved, public skepticism about those advocating the spending and the argument that it's for the public good increases. Okay? So there is a mood about government now. There's a mood about advocacy these days that you have to factor in and think about this. And Ken will talk about this in just a minute, but there is strength in actually communicating and unleashing people to tell stories, okay, around your issue. The second box that I'll just touch on very quickly is how you go about sharing the information. And again, a series of quick checkoff boxes, okay? The source of the information I've suggested makes a difference, okay? So think about who's doing what and how they get positioned. It's all well and good to have the experts, but there's a role for experts. The stories are, as Ann suggested, it's the children, it is the future worker, it is the parents, it's your coworker, it's that. Those are the stories people will listen to. In all marketing exercises, frequency and penetration make a difference. Frequency is how many times you hear the message, and penetration is how deep have you targeted into the audiences you're trying to reach. Backup and sustainability are important. These are not messages that live by themselves day by day. Once you've said it is not enough, you want to make sure that the people who become passionate with you as you're successful in your campaign have some place where they can direct people to get accurate information, okay? So that you've always got a backup. There's a backup stop, and the reason that's important is nobody likes an argument. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them believe they are wasting their time. Even less than not liking an argument, nobody likes losing an argument, okay? And so you need to make sure that your people understand you're not having an argument, you're engaging in a conversation. They should engage in conversations, but you want them to win the conversations, which means you make sure the information's available, you can make resources available to them, etc. Winning is persuasive, okay? It is well and good to persuade people that you have a massive and major problem, but at some point in time in the conversation it becomes depressing, okay? And so you need to be talking about the things that are working, that is moving, the opportunity that is here, so they are focused on a happy place where they could make a difference and go from there. Kenan, I'll turn that over to you.
So I'm going to piggyback off of what Jim was saying. Let me just drill it down into this world, telling the story of the early care and education. And I think as everyone has heard today, it's not just about one story. There are so many stories in this room that need to be told if we want to move the needle. And so the question is, how do we start to do that? As we're thinking about telling our stories, there are kind of three things we need to take a look at. One is field position. Second is target audiences. the target audiences aren't necessarily in this room right now. There are the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people across the state that need to weigh in on this issue if we want to start moving the needle on all of the things that we're talking about, because this is a complicated story. And then the third really is telling the story in a way that moves people, motivates people, and wants them to be advocates for the issues you guys care about. So as we take a look at the field position side of it, who are the audience? Who are we communicating with? What are the perceptions? A lot of people don't take a moment to say, how do people perceive me? And I think it was mentioned earlier that some people don't perceive the field of early care and education the way we want them to see it. And so what does that look like? And how does that change the messaging as you're walking in and better understanding who you're talking to? And the third is, what influences are out there that are already impacting them, especially when we're talking about ARPA funds. If we care about the ARPA funds, well, a lot of people care about the ARPA funds, and they're not necessarily on our issue. They're on other issues. And we need to understand that as we're walking into it. So as we talk about knowing your target audience, all too often people say, all right, if they just knew everything that I know, they're going to come to the same conclusion that I have. It's not true. They really do see it as their own personal pieces. So it is not about, sorry you can't see that. It's not telling people about everything you know. It's about identifying and sharing with those the things that will move and motivate them to get where you want them to be. So take the time to know your target audience. What issues do they care about? What issues are they championing? Why should they care about your issues? And this is important to think about before you're going out and advocating. Why should they care about your issues? Why should they care that, it's not affordable if they don't have kids? Think about those types of things. Why do you value them as a target audience? And which of your stories are going to motivate and move them? So let's really kind of talk about telling the story real quickly. One of the questions is, are you talking at your audience or you're connecting with your audience? You don't want to be talking at your audience. You want to be connecting with them. Scientifically, people remember stories more than they remember facts. All too often we want to throw out the $15 or $22 or something like that. What they remember are stories because they can see themselves in them. Stories really do evoke emotion. They inspire. They bring us together. They etch in the brain and they motivate to action. Everybody loves movies. Everybody loves books. You think about those, and those are all stories. We need to be telling the early care and education story. And we need to think about how we do that in a way in which people see them in it and they get motivated. So we all have stories, personal experiences, life experiences, business experiences, home, family, etc. We need to package those up. So where do we start? And this is not an exhaustive list, but I mentioned earlier, early care and education is a complex piece. We talk about it here today. Strong workforce, the actual early care and education workforce pipeline, and compensation. Those are stories that we need to be talking about. The cost of early care and education, quality of life, and how early care and education relates to that. ROI, child development. We take a look at those, and again, that's not an exhaustive list. If we take a look at our target audiences and their beliefs, causes, and values, there's common connections there. I'll guarantee it. We need to find them, and we need to be doing a better job of telling our stories to those people so that we can move the needle on this issue. And so just to kind of wrap it up, early care and education, it's a complex issue. There's not just one issue out there that we need to be talking about. And there are multiple voices that need to be involved. ARPA has opened a door that I think for a long time has been kind of just ajar with early care and education. Employers are starting to say, oh my God, I didn't realize this was such a big issue. They're starting to care about this stuff a lot. This is a marathon, not a sprint. This isn't going to happen overnight. And so you've got to be willing to say to yourself, all right, I can't just go tell one story and I'm done. I need to be talking and talking and talking and talking. Multiple voices are needed, and don't forget to include a strong call to action. So I asked the panel up here because some of these people represent some of the target audiences we want to talk about. So, Mark, I'm going to start with you because you're so shy. What do elected officials on the front lines, what stories do they need to hear, and what stories do they need to tell?
I think it's an economics story with a social impact element. What I mean by that is in county government, the way we succeed is by having a very successful, strong state. The way the state is going to be successful is by having a very vibrant private sector economy. We got a lot of public sector in our state, but the way we're going to move forward is a strong private sector. So what does the private sector need to be successful? Lots of things. But one of them is a strong, talented workforce. How do we get that workforce? Well, we attract them, we grow them, we want to keep them, we train them, we educate them. But getting them into the workforce, there are some impediments. One of the major impediments is childcare. Got a lot of people on the sidelines right now that aren't able to get into the workforce because of childcare. What are the impediments to getting that childcare? Well, it's sufficiency of providing of slots, I guess, with highly educated, and this is the problem, well-compensated individuals. I mean, to me, it's very clear. And if we can address that, the social impact element is what was referenced earlier, down the road. A highly educated or cared for young person has so much more to offer society in benefits than the opposite. I mean, that cost savings, and this is the difficult part, because if we're dealing with politicians, it's hard to prove what didn't happen. We educated young people, therefore, we didn't have a criminal 20 years from now. It's hard to prove that. But intuitively, we all know that. That's that social impact element of it. So I would suggest to you the story is, if we want to be successful as a state, if we want to position our state and community for future success, then we need to recognize the underlying elements and ingredients that are necessary to put us there. And one of the major elements of that, among many, but one of the major elements is affordable childcare. And one of the ways you get to that is by having a workforce in the childcare industry that is well compensated and recognized for the contribution they make. That's what I would suggest is the story that, at least at the local level, and I would suggest likely at the state level, needs to be told.
So, Chris, I'd say the same question in terms of the business community. What is the business community? What stories do they need to be hearing? What stories do they need to be telling? I think, Heather was here a little while ago, and I mean, she tapped on a couple of them, but just this room encouraged her to think differently. So how do we amplify that? What stories do your business leaders need to hear and need to be telling?
Well, first of all, part of our telling stories is how we communicate the challenges of childcare, and I need to put a plug in for raisingwisconsin.org, new website. Just got launched, pulls together a lot of this information. So as you're wanting to share where people can get information, please check that website out, because it's pulling in a lot of what we talked about today. I think for businesses, it's interesting because we do an annual survey of businesses of what their most pressing challenges are from the C-suite level. And childcare is always there, but it's not on the top. And I've struggled with that, knowing the challenges that we have with childcare. And I think that what we need more of those frontline managers to be telling the stories that they're dealing with employees, because they are in the trenches with their workers and they know the challenges when workers have to go home early or can't come into work and can't work overtime because they can't find the adequate childcare. I'm not sure that those stories are getting to the top executives to realize that those are the real challenges that their employees are facing. I think it's getting filtered out a little bit because of the communication that exists within businesses. So I think businesses and business leaders need to hear more of the stories from the families that are struggling with trying to find childcare. so that they can get a better understanding of that absolutely ripple effect that runs through their organization when workers can't find that child care. I love stories. Rusty and I worked together for years, and I still love telling stories, and I always told every reporter in my newsroom that every person has a story. Some of them are more boring than others, but if you talk to them long enough, you can find a good story to tell. And I think we also need to make connections between the stories of child care and what that means to us as a community and as a society. It's those families that can drop their children off knowing they're in a safe, secure environment for that day. They can go to work and give their full effort to applying themselves at work, come and pick their children up and know that they've been enriched that day, and to know that now they can go home and spend time as a family and not have to worry about where's Jimmy going to go tomorrow, because today was just a stopgap measure. So those connections we have to do a better job of family, child care, business, and making those connections, because we're all interdependent on all of them to make our community successful.
And Jody, I think we've heard from you and others on the front lines some of the stories that need to be told. What isn't being told loud enough from your perspective?
I think exactly what Chris was talking about. It's employers really listening to the challenges their employees are having because of child care issues. I think there's a culture in most businesses of that's child care. You figure that out. Your job is to get to work. And that is not a helpful stance anymore, because the child care factors are just so real. I think families can continue to tell their stories. I'm really curious. I don't think we've heard from grandparents enough. Anecdotally, we hear about grandparents who are retiring early so that they can care for their grandchildren, because their children could not find child care. I have a person on my board of directors who's in that spot exactly. She used to run a child care center, and she retired, and now she's caring for her grandchild because her daughter needed help with child care. I think that's an untold story, and I think it's impacting the workforce a lot. We just don't have a measurement for it.
Thank you. Rusty, here's a question for you. Above the fold, what's the top two stories to get the public engaged on this issue?
Well, let's remember the points that you pointed to. Remember your audience. No one has said it, but okay, I will. Most of those guys in the C-suite are guys. And they may not always be as empathetic to this issue as they need to be. They need your help to understand that. They need to understand the cost to their businesses, as well as the potential growth in our region. I think that's really important. The other thing is, remember your audience. Remember who you're trying to curry favor with. Jenny and I are working on an interesting project trying to curry favor for the second building in the science complex at UW-La Crosse. And one would think that a 1967 building that leaks when it rains, has no fire suppression, it is not ADA accessible, would matter to legislators. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm sad to say I don't really think a lot of them give a damn. But what do they hear from? Business supporters. And business supporters say, we need STEM-educated graduates for our business to grow. Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's the argument. Not having this new building means we don't have the capacity to pump out STEM graduates. So I think truly it's taking that step back. One other thing that you just mentioned. AARP in this state used to visit our editorial board every year, and they talk a lot about the influence of grandparents in child care, in caregiving, up and down the generational ladder. Wouldn't they be a really good partner as this discussion goes on? Have you reached out to them to add their voices to this kind of a discussion? I would suggest that would be a good strategy.
I would like to add one more audience, and that is because we've mentioned legislators. Remember the local elected officials, our county board supervisors, those who are on our city councils. They also need to hear these stories directly from people living in their communities. Our state level folks need that, but the ARPA dollars have come through to local municipalities. That's where the decisions are getting made, and some folks at those tables really haven't been exposed to your stories, our stories.
So let me close this session. Ken, do you have closing comments you want to make?
That's it.
Let me close this session with a couple of observations, because I think it is, it was a great session. Thanks, Ken. A couple of things. I watched the audience today interact with the speakers. Back in the day, we used to wire people in audiences to see what happened to their heart rates, et cetera, as they were watching things. And I can tell you when the heart rates would have gone up. You can tell, you can feel it in a room, okay? So, and they were all stories. It's when somebody says, I'm a mother, so Ann says that, and Heather says that, and somebody else has a story that's relevant because they had a personal experience interacting with the issues that you were talking about, and they were confirming those issues. And you say, so you know that works, okay, because it does capture it, puts a human face on the story. And you say, but we live in a world of new technologies and new capacity. So here we are doing an event, and we had 60 people register to be in this room. We had another 60 plus people register to be online. But we're videotaping all of this, okay? And this will go on Competitive Wisconsin's website. And it's there, and you can send people to it. And to put that in some context, so we got 120 people, give or take a nickel, gathered today physically, and some of them left early, and that's fine, because they'll be able to go and watch the rest of it. And what I will tell you is you may have noticed that we talked about a digital platform where you could go and get information. Before we opened the doors today, over 400 people had gone to the digital library, okay? Just based upon our mailing, our invitation process. So he said, what would happen if all of you started to say, give people a place that they can go and tape their story? We all use Zoom. Lots of people use Zoom these days, okay? Think about libraries where they could go and do it and set it up. And now think about the mass, so if somebody says, hi, I'm Fred. I'm from Sheboygan County, and I can't get to work because, and here's the experience I'm having with it, all right? Think about that wall of faces, that wall of stories that is searchable. So a legislator or a local official, I think you would be amazed at the number of people who are prepared to tell that story. If Chris is right, that some 60,000 potentially were affected by, by when we closed shop, the schools, et cetera, whoever had that number. Right, so there's all of that there. This is part of the energy, is to merge your passion and your interest with the technology and the awareness that the issue is going to become more important, not less important. Okay? And so all of those things are available.